This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East. During the National Dialogue Conference in Ramallah and Gaza, the Palestinian President, Mahmoud Abbas, announced if Hamas and Fatah do not come to an agreement within 10 days, then he will propose a referendum based on the document for national agreement that was presented by senior Palestinian prisoners.
The Palestinian president surprised everyone by saying that all Palestinians must come to an agreement or risk losing everything. In front of the National Dialogue Conference, Abu Mazen said that either the nation belongs to us all or we will all drown with it. If the dialogue fails to reach some mutual agreement that will get the Palestinians out of the political, security and economic crisis, then he will issue a public referendum in 40 days that will be based on the Palestinian prisoners' document.
The dialogue and meetings have not ended. Starting tomorrow, we have only 10 days. If you do not come to an agreement by then, quite frankly, we are no longer officially in charge. In the next 40 days, I am going to call for a public referendum. I want to go to the people. No nation will agree on a misguided path. The people will speak their word.
The president set a timeline during which we hope to come to agreement regarding the prisoner's document. The referendum is part of the democratic process. If the factions cannot come to an agreement, then the people will decide on this matter.
In his opening speech, Abu Mazen started out both angry and firm, condemning the Israeli aggression and stressing that the Palestinians will not allow anyone to decide their fate except for themselves. He highlighted the success of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and its relationship with the world, confirming that he will not allow the government to acquire more authority than the law has called for. He indicated that he opposed the reforms and the special forces that the Palestinian government recently deployed, which Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh insists on maintaining and is trying to legalize them.
The Palestinian government and people will not offer any compromises that violate the Palestinian rights and principles.
We consider these special forces as illegal, and they open the doors to chaos that may lead to a civil war. They need to be withdrawn because they are illegal.
The Palestinian dialogue is based on the Palestinian prisoners' document, which was signed by all the factions and discussed the creation of a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders, relying on negotiations with Israel, the right of resistance in occupied lands, the recognition of Arab and international peace initiatives, and the formation of a national unity government.
This is an important opportunity. The national document was signed by 4 parliamentary committees and 8 political factions.
As the national dialogue continued, the people of Ramallah held a funeral procession for the martyrs who died as a result of the Israeli aggression yesterday, calling for successful national dialogue and an end to the fighting. A war of words has turned into a war of rifles. In these lands, discussions are ongoing amidst continued Israeli attacks on the land and its people. Politicians and observers agree that without Palestinian unity, it will be impossible to remain firm in the face of the occupation.
Was the Prime Minister's visit to the United States considered a diplomatic success? That's the question IDA's Efrat Batat put to Alon Pinkas, former Israeli Consul General in New York.
Absolutely. I mean, given that it's a first visit, given that it's a preparatory trip, in that it prepares the relationship for the future crises and disagreements that may evolve in the next few months, in the upcoming year. I think it was a success, both the meetings with the administration and the speech that he gave last night, joint meeting of Congress.
Is Olmert returning with any concrete accomplishments, perhaps anything more significant than expected?
I think that concretely what he comes back with is an understanding that he could pick up the phone and call the president right now, that he familiarized himself with the president and vice versa, and that he presented the president with a general outlook or a general macro strategic view of his plans in terms of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
American officials went from examining Olmert's ideas to describing them as bold and interesting. Did Olmert succeed in gathering support for his convergence plan?
Truthfully, I don't think that this is what he was seeking on the first visit. He was coming there to tell them basically the following. I know that you supported the unilateral disengagement or disassociation from Gaza because we went back to the international borderline. In the West Bank, it's not that Judea and Samaria, it is not the same thing, topographically, demographically, security-wise, etc. I think that he was planning to say here, listen, I know there's a sequential relationship between the roadmap, the two-state solution, etc. We're not there yet, but I want you to know and understand explicitly and as clearly as I can state the case that I cannot wait for the Palestinian political culture to mature into a two-state solution. I understand that it's the desired solution. However, because of demographics and security and the need to remain a Jewish democracy, which is how I view Israel, we may have to resort to something that is not a result of negotiations. If you've noticed, he did not call it unilateral, neither in his press conference with the president nor in his speech in front of both houses of Congress last night.
But do you think that at this point we can say the Americans are realizing that they don't have a better solution to offer?
Yes. Oh, yes. I think that if you have, that's a great question, because if you have to point to why is this trip a success in marketing the initial idea or the foundations of what I meant by realignment, note the new term that he introduced into the political lexicon. It's no longer disengagement, it's realignment. It's that the Americans said between themselves, do we have something better than what he had put on the table? The answer is no. Do we have the energy, the resources, or the time to come up with something better, given that our priorities right now in the Middle East are different? To enumerate them, Iran, Iraq, and the climbing prices of oil. And since the answer to that is no as well, they may, I predict that they will accept the realignment plan, given or provided that it is presented to them in a way that clearly makes it worth their while to invest their time.
Alon Pinkas, former Israeli Consul General of New York, once again, thank you so much for your time.
House Speaker Nabi Habib stressed that stability in southern Lebanon will be reflected in all of Lebanon, adding that the country could not smile with its southern part in pain. Bede was speaking during a ceremony in Jazin to mark the 6th year since Israel withdrew its troops from southern Lebanon. Hezbollah will be marking the occasion this afternoon in the southern city of Tyre.
The first 25th of May of the new centenary was a new beginning for many Lebanese who had been kept away from their homes and lands for over 2 decades. Even though Israeli-occupied South Lebanon was finally freed, Israel and its troops are not far away just across the volatile Lebanese-Israeli border, which is also known as the UN Drawn Blue Line. The International Blue Helmet troops have been the mediating power on the border, but Milo Struger, senior advisor to the commander of UNIFIL, stressed the UN forces do not have enforcement powers.
UNIFIL does not have enforcement powers. UNIFIL cannot enforce on the parties, cannot enforce ceasefire, cannot force them to respect the blue line. So the essential function of UNIFIL is liaison with the parties. For liaison to be successful, for our mission to be successful, we have to have a positive political will of the parties. And this is the main element in the overall situation. The parties on both sides of the blue line, they have to have a political will to keep the quiet along the blue line.
Israeli planes routinely violate Lebanese airspace, and Hezbollah has occasionally targeted the Israeli army in the occupied Sheba Farms, a disputed sliver of land where the borders of Syria, Israel and Lebanon meet. Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nassrallah warned Israel on Tuesday his party would answer any attack by firing thousands of rockets on all parts of northern Israel. Nasrallah's comments were made as part of Lebanon's celebrations of the 6th anniversary of Israel's withdrawal from the southern Lebanon. The Iranian and Syrian-backed Hezbollah helped end Israel's occupation of South Lebanon. Any conflict between the US and Israel and Iran will also likely draw in Hezbollah and Palestinian groups in a wider conflagration.
The Lebanese resistance is celebrating the liberation of southern Lebanon in a festival in the town of Sur.
In the southern Lebanese town of Sur, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese came from different parts of the country to celebrate the 6th anniversary of the Day of Resistance, Victory, and Liberation. People from different national factions, political and religious parties attended the ceremony. In a speech delivered during the celebration, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nassrallah, stressed that the day southern Lebanon was liberated is a model of resistance for all the people of the world.
I send my blessing to you on this patriotic day of celebration. This national day of celebration, this Islamic day of celebration. No one will be able to erase or cross out this day or take it out of our hearts because it was written with the blood that ran through the veins of our mujahideen and children.
Sayyid Nassrallah sent his thanks to everyone who has supported the resistance.
We must renew our thanks to every person who supported and continue to support the resistance movement in the Arab and Islamic worlds, from nations and governments to political parties and public figures. I especially thank Syria, its people, its army, and its government under the leadership of the late President Hafez al-Assad and his successor Bashar al-Assad and the Islamic Republic of Iran.
السيد الرئيس بشار الأسد والجمهورية الإسلامية في إيران.
وأكد السيد نصر الله أن خيار المقاومة في لبنان.
Sayyid Nassrallah stressed that the resistance in Lebanon is a national effort and includes supporting the Palestinian cause and cooperation with Syria and the Arab world. He added that if Independence Day in Lebanon is a national day, then so is Resistance and Liberation Day.
God willing, May 25th will mark a day of victory between the anniversary of the Nakba on May 15th and the Naksa anniversary on July 5th, and will herald a new era. After May 25th, words like Nakba and Naksa will hopefully no longer be part of our vocabulary, and instead we will say resistance, liberation, and victory.
ولكن مقاومة وتحرير ونصر وانتصار.
His Majesty King Abdullah II and Queen Rania Al Abdullah visited the home of the martyr Khalid Al Dasu'i to offer condolences to the martyr's family.
Why did you deprive me of my father when we are still children? Abu Hudayfa and Abu Musab al-Zakari.
The tears of this 8-year-old Mara tell the entire story. Innocent people are killed, families lose their loved ones, and children cry for their fathers without knowing why they were killed. Mara and her 4 siblings will live without the love of their father, Khalid al-Dasu'i. To Mara and other children like her, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi has become a heinous killer who they only read about in stories. He is the man who stole away their happiness and assassinated their innocent dreams. Because the pain and sadness of Jordanians is also felt by His Majesty King Abdullah II and Queen Rania, the two came to the martyr Khalid's home to express and embody the great love they feel for every child, brother, or family that has been touched by the hand of treachery and terrorism. The martyr's family did not know that their guests would be the king and queen. Thus, the look of surprise remained on their faces as they listened to their words, which were spoken to help the family overcome this tragedy and to confirm that Jordan will always remain an impenetrable wall in the face of anyone who tries to target its stability and security.
How are you doing? Your situation is very difficult. We don't want you to feel alone. You are like our brothers, our family.
Thank God. We are blessed as long as you are with us.
Yes, it is true that one of our brothers died, but we are all one family. God knows how much we are suffering.
I understand your situation and urge you to be patient and keep high morale. We will continue to keep in touch with you.
Mara loves you very much, and she says she wants to grow up to be a doctor. Go tell His Majesty the King.
What do you want to do for a living? You want to be a doctor? May God grant you this wish.
I am very happy because you caught my father's killer.
Words were spoken from the heart, and eyes were filled with tears of happiness over the royal visit and the efforts of the Fursan al-Haq unit in the General Intelligence Department and the Special Forces. This department was the first Arab intelligence agency to infiltrate the Al-Qaeda organization, which instilled fear in the hearts of thousands of innocent people and deluded them into thinking that it was beyond reach. That is what Al-Qaeda thought, but it was wrong. The arrest of Qarboudi does not stop the tears of Mara and her siblings from falling, but it sends a clear message to Zarqawi and his terrorists that in Jordan they will face an enemy that will pursue them wherever they are and will punish anyone who attacks Jordan, its citizens, and its security. The intelligence department's victory over this terrorist organization imbued happiness in the heart of the family of the martyr Khalid. This happiness also remains in the hearts of all Jordanian families whose loved ones were martyred in the terrorist acts of last year. This happiness confirms that those who kill in the name of religion have been exposed, and revealing that members of Al-Qaeda follow misguided takfiri ideology that must be confronted.
The United Nations announced it would send respected diplomat Lakhdar Ibrahimi to Khartoum next week to secure the go-ahead for a visit by UN assessment team planning how to enforce the Darfur Peace Accord. UN spokesman Stephane Dujarric said Ibrahimi, a former Algerian diplomat who retired as UN Special Envoy late December, would be accompanied on the trip by Hedi Anabi, the Deputy Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations. He told a press briefing that both diplomats will be conducting consultations with the government of Sudan on the role of the UN can play in the implementation of the Darfur Peace Agreement, including the proposed transition from an African Union force to a UN peacekeeping force. He said the two envoys would hold talks with Sudanese officials in Khartoum on Wednesday. The announcement followed the unanimous adoption by the UN Security Council of a binding resolution urging speedy implementation of the peace accord to end 3 years of strife in Sudan's Darfur region, threatening strong and effective measures against those standing in the way.
The 15-member body also called for the deployment of a joint AU-UN technical assessment team within 1 week of the adoption of this resolution to lay the groundwork for a handover of the AU peacekeeping mission to the UN. Duarik said the Khartoum had yet to give the green light for the deployment of the assessment team. Jan Egeland, the United Nations Emergency Relief Coordinator, warned the Security Council that the humanitarian situation in the strife-torn Darfur region of Sudan could get even worse in the coming days if the international community fails to take immediate steps to ensure the implementation of recent peace accords between the Sudanese government and rebel forces and strengthen the South African Union mission in Sudan amid providing more funding. On the security front, Egeland urged the Security Council to take immediate steps to strengthen AMIS and speed the transition to a UN operation. He added that AMIS needs to play an important role in implementing the peace agreement which was signed on May 5th in Abuja, Nigeria, just 1 day before Egeland left for his week-long trip to Sudan and eastern Chad. He said the appeal for Darfur is currently short of $389 million, while the total shortfall for the rest of Sudan under the UN Work Plan for 2006 amounts to $983 million, adding that so far many vital sectors have received less than 20%. He cautioned that in the face of more violence and attacks, humanitarian operations could not be sustained and relief agencies would have to withdraw, warning that within weeks, not months, people in some areas in Darfur could face more than deaths and hunger than before. Fighting between the government, the pro-government militias and rebels have killed scores of thousands of people in Darfur and uprooted 2 million more in the last 3 years. According to Egeland, the threat of safety of relief workers and civilian population in eastern Chad is as serious as in Darfur, causing many people to flee from Chad to Darfur. He added that if the security situation continues to deteriorate and if relief workers leave, there will be dramatic consequences for hundreds and thousands of people in the region.
UN envoy Al-Akhdar Al-Ibrahimi conducted a series of meetings with officials from the Sudanese government to let a UN team of experts visit Darfur. The anticipated visit aimed at paving the way to transfer the peace mission in Darfur from the African Union to international forces. Khartoum opposes this and demands the enforcement of the African Union role in Darfur, as was agreed in the latest Abuja peace agreement with rebels from Darfur. For the past several months, the Sudanese government has influenced its public against what it described as a foreign invasion, but now it is reconsidering its political position after the UN Security Council decided to send international forces to Darfur. Sudan has conditionally accepted these forces. The Sudanese government believes that these conditions are important to convince the Sudanese public that international forces will only be peacekeeping forces, especially in light of the Abuja peace agreement, which was signed by armed movements in Darfur. Sudan also wants to avoid confrontations with the international community, which may have negative consequences. This explains why the UN envoy Al-Akhdar Al-Ibrahimi managed to convince Sudan to set a timetable for the deployment of international forces in Darfur, but he also addressed the concerns of Khartoum.
What is happening now is that the UN envoy Al-Akhdar Ibrahimi is opening a dialogue between Sudan and the UN, which complies with the Abuja peace agreement. This dialogue precedes the arrival of the UN experts team, who will assess the possibility of transferring the peace mission from the African Union to international forces.
The Sudanese government still prefers strengthening the role of the African Union in Darfur, but it has to choose one of three choices in order to protect civilians in the region: whether to use the help of armed forces that signed the Abuja peace agreement, or to use the Popular Army that signed the Nefasha peace agreement, or to accept international forces. Sudan has proposed the first two choices to the UN envoy, but he was unwilling to discuss proposals except for the deployment of international forces in the region to take over the duties of the African Union forces. This explains why Al-Akhdar Ibrahimi made a very brief comment after he met with Sudanese officials. He was waiting for a clear Sudanese position in support of the UN Security Council resolution.
Now we are explaining the situation, and we are having very good dialogue with the government. I believe that they will announce the decision that they will make.
The Sudanese opposition, which has accused the government of escalating the situation in Darfur, called on the government to accept the help of the international forces due to the deteriorating security situation in the region and because the government forces were involved in the conflict. They also believe that there is no confidence between the refugees living in military camps and the Sudanese government.
Accepting these international forces is necessary. All that we can say as national Sudanese who care about maintaining our sovereignty is to demand that international forces be drawn from countries that do not have colonization ambitions.
أسامة عباس قناة أبو ظبي من أمام وزارة الخارجية السودانية.
في الشأن العراقي رفع القاضي رؤوف رشيد عبد الرحمن رئيس
Mr. Raouf Rashid Abd al-Rahman, head of the Iraqi High Criminal Court in Baghdad and the presiding judge over the trial of the former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein and 7 co-defendants in the Dujail case, adjourned the court session until May 29, 2006. Today's court session focused on testimonies from a number of defense witnesses, including former Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz and a number of Saddam's former personal companions.
The Iraqi High Criminal Court held its 28th session in the trial of the former Iraqi President Saddam Hussein and 7 co-defendants. The defendants are standing trial in what has become known as the Dujail case. Tariq Aziz, the former Iraqi Deputy Prime Minister, gave testimonies for the first time since he was arrested nearly 3 years ago. Mr. Aziz justified persecuting and putting to death those assassins believed to be behind the attempt on Saddam's life in 1982. He also justified destroying fields in the town of Dujail, claiming that Iraqi laws permit such actions if they are in public interests. The witnesses also confirmed that the assassins' attempt on Saddam Hussein was one of many attacks targeting Iraqi government officials during that time.
During that period, some parties affiliating with the Iranian regime carried out bomb attacks and assassination attempts targeting Iraqi government officials and innocent people. For example, if a person throws a hand grenade to kill Tariq Aziz, he will kill 10 others as well. The Dujail incident was not an isolated one. It is part of an ongoing assassination campaign targeting government officials and the Iraqi people.
يعني هي حلقة مستمرة لهذه العمليات اللي استهدفت المواطنين بالإضافة إلى المسؤولين.
The court also listened to testimonies for a number of Saddam's former personal companions, including Abd al-Hamid Muhammad, known as Abu Hmoud. Mr. Abd Hmoud testified on behalf of Saddam Hussein, saying that the former Iraqi president went on with his scheduled speech in the town of Dujail despite the attempt on his life. He also testified that Saddam did not give orders to take revenge from the people of Dujail in the aftermath of the assassination attempt. Today's court session was not any different than previous ones. A strong altercation ensued between the judge and the defense team. The judge vowed to hold the defense attorneys in contempt or remove them from the court if they continue to disrespect the integrity of the court and hamper its efforts to serve justice. Due to security concerns, today's court session was televised 20 minutes late and parts of the hearing were censored out. The court adjourned until next Monday.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news. with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.